Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with me, your host. My name is Chad Medved. This is my podcast. Coming off a down week, coming off a no episode week last week after a pretty eventful last couple weeks, actually. First and foremost, we had the 300 episode party at Brillo Box in Bloomfield, and it was a smash. We had a room full of the who's who of the city. I could not be happier with how the whole event went. We had a stellar time. Definitely shout out to Lou at Brillo Box for, hosting the party there and allowing me to, kind of come in and take over his event space on top of Brillo Box in Bloomfield. Another shout out to Anthony Badamo of Badamo's Pizza for providing more pizza than needed to feed an army. We had a pizza bar up on the stage equipped with 2 trays of delicious salad, and then we had 2 big trays of sandwich rings, and on top of that we had more than 10 dozen wings from Streets on Carson. So I mean, it was an insane gathering. And to top it all off, we had a wedding style cookie table from a local baker named Nicole Medved, and it was highly regarded. Rachel Ann Bouvier was in the building, and she could not stop raving about the cookie table. Antoinette was cracking me up. Her and someone else came up to me and was like, I think I saw Rachel putting cookies in her purse. And it was just a great time. We had all kinds of big names in the building. Sally Wiggin pulled up, which was an absolute honor. I was sitting there talking to people. Sally Wiggin walked in, and I was just blown away. She messaged me back whenever I sent the invite, and she said she was coming, but who knows really? Someone could just say, yeah, I'll be there, and then they just kind of brush it off. But Sally pulled up, hung out for a couple hours, took some pictures with everyone, and she had a hell of a time. I got to buy Sally a non-alcoholic beverage. She's sober, but I got to buy her a non-alcoholic beverage. She talked to my mom, and it was a big moment. Rick Seaback was there, and we had a slew of other people that have been guests on I'll Call You Right Back podcast over the last 7 years. 300 episodes means 300 different guests, and a lot of them pulled up for me to celebrate this milestone in the podcast. And I got to actually leave mid-party to walk Sally Wiggin to her car. I mean, come on. What kind of world are we living in where, that actually happened? As a young kid watching her on TV all the time, I got to leave my celebration to go help her walk to her car, and it was an honor. I was just blown away by the whole evening, and appreciative for everyone that came out to help me celebrate this milestone with I'll Call You Right Back podcast. I mean, it has been a passion project for me over the last 7 years that I have, fell in love with completely. I fell in love with sitting down and talking to the people that make Pittsburgh the city that we love so much. And I bring them into the studio and I talk to them at length about their life's work and their passions and what they do. And it's really something that I really, truly love. So I'm excited to, keep the Jeep riding with more great guests and, kind of just get on that path to 400 episodes. So we got some work to do. Again, thank you to everyone who came. Thank you to everyone who supported, who donated, who bought merch at the party, and I just couldn't say enough about it. And then on top of the 300 episode party, last weekend I was hosted up in Johnstown by a place called Center for Metal Arts, and it was an incredible time. So Pat Quinn is a guy who is the program director for Center of the Metal Arts in Johnstown. And, he came across my work, or I came across his work through the Commonwealth Press episode. Commonwealth Press commissioned them to do some commemorative coins that are available on Commonwealth Press's website. And I thought it was so cool that they got those made. And then, I reached out to Dan from Commonwealth Press, and he was like, man, you should check this place up in Johnstown. They're doing some great stuff. So basically, Center for Metal Arts is a place that holds workshops that range in different experience levels from beginner to advanced. And Pat reached out to me, and he was like, hey man, would love for you to come up to have a tour. And we were talking about doing an episode, and I was like, hey, I would love to tour this place before we could sit down and talk at length about what you do. So he reached out to me and was like, come on up and come and take this class this weekend where you forge a knife with a incredible knife maker, Jeff Fader. And it was a weekend long workshop, and it was an incredible time. It really, really, really was an incredible time. And I've never done something like that before. I've never had any experience with, working with metal and forging and, swinging hammers like that. And it was just really, really a great opportunity for me, which was pretty wild because it kind of lined up at a perfect time, because I sit down with another Metalsmith worker this week for my guest as the podcast guest this week. So I had this great time this weekend at Center for Metal Arts, and this week I sit down with Michael Studebaker of Studebaker Metals. So if you're not familiar with Studebaker Metals, they are a local brand that has been around for 11 years, who created this brand that's kind of taken things by storm. They have a strong online presence, but it all started pretty fascinatingly. Michael went to school. He got a BFA in metalsmithing in Philadelphia, ended up working some years in different museums in Philadelphia, and then turn of events had him move back to Pittsburgh. And he was kind of just in his parents' basement, just wrenching down there, making some random jewelry here or there. And then fate brought him his partner in life and in business, Alyssa, who is like I said, it's his partner in life and in business. And they complemented each other in such a way that they were able to expand this brand from his basement to this crazy presence that they have online and in the city of Pittsburgh and all over. So what they specialize is in hand-forged accessories. They have keychains, they got necklaces, they got rings, they got cuffs, they got all sorts of different things. And I've been a fan of their work for, many years now. We talk about it in the beginning. I originally seen these at the Handmade Arcade a number of years ago, before they kind of got too big. They were at this local market, and I was checking it out, but then they were able to grow to the point where they got this brand new workspace and showroom down on Smallman St in the Strip, and it's down there now, and it's an incredible space. So I reached out to them, and I was like, hey, I would love to have yins in and learn more about the brand and how it came to be. And it was a fascinating episode. Michael came in, and we sat down and we talked about everything from, how he got involved in metalsmithing in the beginning, his start in just kind of starting to become an artist, and how it kind of morphed into him making these hand-forged accessories, and what Alyssa brought to the table as far as fashion marketing. She's a fashion marketing genius, and she complemented his hands-on work in the basement of him making these things in his parents' basement, and she came in and kind of took these things and expanded it into something better, something greater, not even something better, but just something greater. there. You know, they were going to different trade shows and getting their name out there that way, and then they kind of flipped the switch and took their budget that they were using to go to all these trade shows to doing targeted ads and marketing online, which ended up booming their business to something even bigger and greater. And it's just a really fascinating story. This is a pair of people who created this business in the basement of a home in Pittsburgh, and it is now this, like, you know, worldwide business. You know, they're doing orders across, you know, the entire world, and it's fascinating to hear about. It's fascinating to hear about people that are just, you know, makers, you know, real makers in the city of Pittsburgh. And it's cool because, you know, I'm on this kick right now. I obviously got to have my first experience working with metal and forging this past weekend, and then it kind of lined up with my guest this week. And, you know, I recorded this episode a while ago, but the universe made it happen the way it did. And you know, I kind of got bit by the bug of metalworking, so I'm just kind of fascinated by it right now. And it was so cool to listen through this again, and how they kind of approach their business and how they approach their brand and how they continue to grow what they've built into you know, where they are today. And like I said, they have a newer, it's 1 year old now, but they have a showroom and they have a workshop that's down on Smallman Street in the Strip, and it's a beautifully curated showroom, but it has a big workshop in the back, and they're starting to do different classes and workshops there. But this showroom is filled with all sorts of different Studebaker Metals accessories that they have developed over the last 11 years, and it's just fascinating. So I urge you to take a trip down to Smallman Street and go to Studebaker Metals and check out their work and everything they're doing down there. And you could check them out on Instagram and see all their work at Studebaker Metals on Instagram. And it's a fascinating story. So I'm excited for you guys to listen to it. So without further ado, episode 301 of I'll Call You Right Back podcast with Michael Studebaker of Studebaker Metals.
I gotta use the telephone.
Hello?
Telephone.
I'll call you right back.
Telephone.
I'll Call You Right Back podcast. Can understand that. Have you ever done a podcast?
No, I have not.
Never done a podcast.
Never done a podcast.
Love that. I enjoy whenever people come in who never done it. Would you do me a favor and just come up on the mic?
Yep.
You could kind of hear if you like pull away. So
Yeah.
if you you know, closer you get to it, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Does that feel good to you? Audio's cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Feels good. Levels seem good to you?
Yeah, levels seem all right to me. Cool. Yeah, I'm low pressure with this.
Cool.
I'm not too crazy with it all, but yeah, I appreciate you coming over today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I've been a fan of your work for some time now.
Thank you.
Seen it in I was trying to think like where the first time I came across your work, and I think it was like the Handmade Arcade, or maybe one of the I Made at Markets. Are you into one of those?
Handmade Arcade for sure. Yeah, that's the one in-person event that we kind of regularly did for probably about 8 years. We were going to Handmade Arcade, and we did not go this past year because we had just moved the shop from Braddock to the Strip District, and that was just such a huge undertaking that we had no bandwidth to do anything else that year.
Absolutely, I bet.
But yeah, I always really loved going to Handmade Arcade. It was like the one time a year where I got to emerge from the shop and kind of be amongst other people.
Yeah, super fun there that we have those like, you know, opportunities as, you know, just people of the city to be able to like go to one of these places that have like a concentrated dose of all these artisans.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I can gather, other makers in other cities all, that it's viewed as one of the best craft shows in the country to go to. And so it's like they've got a good wait list of people trying to get in there. And I just feel like Pittsburgh does a good job of supporting that. And so that I feel very proud of that, just from like my Pittsburgh side. Like we've got one of the best craft markets because we've got the best customers going to the craft market and supporting it and making it a worthwhile thing for the vendors. And we also have a great showing of local vendors too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot of people in the city doing great things.
Yeah.
Are you from Pittsburgh originally?
I am. Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Forest Hills. So over in the east side, I went to Woodland Hills.
Woodland Hills. Yeah.
Shout out.
How old are you?
38.
38. Okay. Yeah. I never know. People come in. I never know.
Yeah. The hairline.
No, not even that.
Betrays me.
Hairline betrays me. Yeah. So, I mean, like growing up though, what kind of stuff are you into? I assume that you didn't, I assume that you didn't think you were going to own a.
Yeah. I was definitely into creativity in general, but I don't know. I have a couple questions about etiquette when it comes to the podcast here.
Shoot.
Subject matters, kind of just like anything goes.
This is a unique podcast because it's very tangential. It's a long form podcast where it's not really. I don't have it, as you can see. I don't have a notebook. I kind of just ask people to come in and sit down with me that I am interested in, and I come up with organic, spontaneous type of questions. But cool. Yeah, man, you can get into whatever all weeds you want to get into.
Well, speaking of weeds, that's probably what I was most into in high school, and I honestly kind of like maybe launched me in this trajectory. But one of the first kind of making projects for me when I was younger was like I would find plumbing parts and make pipes out of them and things like that. And so I was soldering in the basement with no experience or no guidance whatsoever, and I was doing it secretly as well. And so that was definitely a point of departure for me. But I think generally speaking, I was just into like counterculture stuff. So I was like trying to paint graffiti and skateboard and do all those kinds of things. But I never really felt very confident in anything. And so I never really dove deep on anything. I kind of dabbled in all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was into making stuff, being creative, alternative, those kinds of things.
You come from a creative family, as I see in my research of you. Was your grandfather a cobbler?
Yeah. That's you dug deep.
Yeah, man, I do my research.
Yeah,
this is when people say they have a podcast, it's kind of a it doesn't hold as much value now because of how saturated the world is.
Yeah.
So people are like, yeah, dude got a podcast. What the hell are we going to talk about? But this is, I pour everything into this.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I thought that was kind of fascinating to, grow up with those type of people around.
Absolutely. Yeah. I cite that often as a big inspiration for me, or kind of like something that drew me into an appreciation for handwork in general. I'm from a very early age, being a kid and being in his shop with like the whirling belts on the machines. And by the time I was old enough to really understand what I was looking at, his shop had started to shrink, year after year, less people are getting their shoes repaired.
Yeah.
And so he would always talk about disposable shoes. And by the end, I think his annual income, the first year I filed taxes, I worked in the summer doing Department of Public Works stuff, and my mom did my taxes and my grandfather's taxes that year, and I think our annual income was like pretty much the same, and that was, I was like a pretty jarring thing to understand about being a cobbler.
Yeah.
And he was in Katanning, so north of Pittsburgh, and again, that's kind of like prime Rust Belt territory up there, so you're definitely not going to have a lot of people getting their shoes fixed.
Yeah, there was a time, I think last year, that I was like looking for cobblers, like a legitimate cobbler around the area, and it's hard to kind of nail one down because there's not as many younger people that take up the trade, and the people that our, masters of the trade are like these 85-year-old guys, and they're like, what the fuck is a podcast? So
Right.
I can't really, they don't have like social media that I could reach out to. So I've been trying to, manifest that organically to where I come across an old guy. And, we just get it. I strike up a conversation with pretty much everyone, but it's cool to think about that, to come up into, your childhood and being able to like be exposed to things like that. My dad was he worked in construction, and he always was like wrenching in the garage. So very much was like something that I was conscious of growing up at, I don't know, I guess whenever I was younger, I wasn't as keen to follow in those footsteps of it all. Right. But it's cool. So I mean, if you're growing up as a kid, you were saying you were into like skating and like, all the counterculture stuff, but what kind of stuff were you into, where as far as like you thought what you were going to do after high school?
That's a good question. Honestly, the decision to go to an art school was based on my desire to be an art teacher. I think, when I was in high school, I was kind of like looking at what was next. And I had a big pressure from my parents to go to school because my dad worked for WDUQ, the Duquesne University radio station. And because he worked for a private university, they had this benefit that offered tuition exchange. And so I was able to pick from a list of schools where they would accept his tuition benefit at a different school. And so there was a couple art schools on there, and I found one in Philly. And I knew that I liked art class. And in my senior year of high school, I took 3 periods of art. And so I knew that I definitely wanted to do something creative. And I kind of looked up to my high school art teacher, mostly I'm like, man, I would like to live that lifestyle. Like, he seems like he has a nice life. He's enjoying himself. We'd find roaches in the supply closet and be like, okay, cool, I'm going to do that. And so I think that's what set me in that direction. And I ended up only really fully applying to 2 schools. I applied to Pitt, and I applied to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. RIP, they just closed in June of last year, which is a big bummer.
Tale as old as time with all the art schools.
Yeah, it's sad. But when I got there, the way they have it set up, it's a common thing in most art schools, is you do like a foundation year. And so you go in with kind of like an undeclared major, and you study general 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional drawing, those are like your core classes. And
what did you gravitate to in high school? Like, what was like what did you enjoy?
I was more interested in the 3-dimensional stuff. I've always been more interested in like building and putting things together than drawing and painting and that kind of stuff. And I also never really felt super confident with my skills with like a pencil. And so when the projects that I would work on that would be the most exciting or feel the most rewarding were always more kind of putting things together. And so I figured like, oh, maybe I'll study sculpture or ceramics or something, and then focus on getting the teaching certification, and then, be like a high school art teacher. That was kind of like my goal. Turns out I get to this school, and because I wasn't paying super close attention and I was a little distracted at that age, they didn't even have an art education major at that school. And you could do a concentration, but it would have to be like a double major situation. And so I got there, and I took like the freshman electives. I took one in sculpture, and then I took another one in jewelry making. And at the end of my freshman year, I had to like declare my major, and I was just so blown away by the jewelry studio and how kind of empowering that space was. That's my advisor advised me that if I was really into that facility, focus on that while you're here, paying the tuition to be at this school, because you can go back to school and get a certification. I keep doing that, to teach, from a community college if you really want to teach. But while you're here at this school that has this very special opportunity to be able to access this studio, you should take full advantage of that. And I really appreciate that advice, because definitely not the most like practical advice as far as like what you're going to do after you get out of college, because that's kind of the thing that allowed me to get my dad on board with going to art school was like, well, I'll just be an art teacher. And my mom was super encouraging. Like, she had wished that she had gone to art school. She ended up going to nursing school. And so she 100% the whole time was like, absolutely do that. Like, follow that passion, follow that interest.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm super grateful for that as well. But I walked into that jewelry studio at UArts, and I was just blown away by like the age of the stuff that was in there. There's a lot of like really old tools, but the specificity of all of it. You know, like you walk into this room and there are all these weird looking tools. You have no idea what they do, but they're so hyper specific, and they do a thing, and you can't do that thing without that specific tool.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it kind of like clicks. It's like, if you have the right tool and somebody shows you the technique, you can literally do anything, like anything. And I don't just mean like in a jewelry studio. That's just kind of like that changed my perception of like how to approach new skills. And I really took to that in the jewelry studio, and kind of like, I'm starting from scratch here. Like, I've never touched any of these tools before. I did a little bit in high school, like I used a jeweler's saw and pierced some metal, and then we soldered it together, made like a belt buckle. And
that's cool though.
Yeah, it was cool. I'm grateful for that, because
enough to like, you know, kind of plant that seed that's like a thing. Like,
yeah.
that's what you know. As you're telling me this, I'm thinking, you know, as someone in high school, were you someone that like wore jewelry?
No, I've never really been much of a jewelry person. Yeah, once we started selling jewelry, I started wearing it more, and I like it now. You know, it's definitely a part of my you know, identity. You know, and that's something that I appreciate. But in high school, I think I maybe like had a hemp necklace at one point, or you know, like a beaded necklace or something. And actually, I funded tickets to my senior prom by selling hemp necklaces.
Were you making them yourself?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what a time! You know, hemp necklaces.
Yeah, man, it was pretty cool.
That was funny. My brother was 6 years older than me. I'm 34, so you know, he was right in that sweet spot where I like got exposed to that.
Yeah.
I remember him coming in from Ocean City and buying me a necklace that had like weed seeds on there as like beads, and like, you know, funny things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool to hear that like your school had kind of those opportunities to just like, you know, kind of branch out and do wild things like that, like even make like, you know, your random jewelry project. But yeah, that's neat. Now, whenever you go there and you see the studio and you kind of like, you know, realize that you wanted to kind of immerse yourself in it, you know, does that kind of plant a seed that you want that type of job to where you want to make this like, you know, custom jewelry?
Not quite yet. I think at that point it was like, I just want to be in this space. I want to be working with these tools. And in that studio, like, it was the craft metals program. It was not exclusively a jewelry program.
Oh, okay.
It was focused mostly on jewelry, and that's what most people who went through the program spent their time working on. But it was kind of like bringing like a little bit of blacksmithing in, and then like silversmithing, like making like teapots and things like that. And goldsmithing, like traditional jewelry making, and kind of bringing all of this stuff together in a art centered kind of a space, right? And so like the teachers and the curriculum were geared around like teaching you how to make art. It didn't really matter if it was a teapot or a piece of jewelry or just a sculpture of some sort. You would like think about your concepts and then kind of draw from context of the history of these objects, and which is a cool way to approach it. So it wasn't like super trade school. It was definitely like you learn the techniques and the skills that are relevant to the ideas that you have and the things that you want to make.
And then you have some freedom to go down those paths.
Exactly, yeah. And for me, I've always just been I am so drawn to process and technique, and I like want to be a technician, you know, even if it's like raking leaves. Like, I'm going to have like a very specific way I'm going to rake the leaves.
Absolutely.
You know? And I've always been that way. And so I would just like find a technique and be like, okay, I got to go in hard on this technique, learn it, and then do something ridiculous with it, and then I'll do something else. And so all my work when I was in school was definitely very much like I was trying to maximize the technical education that I was going to be getting while I was there. And also at the time, I had this thought or this belief that I was going to like make art, and that art was going to be important. And not to say that what I am doing, I think what I am doing now is like way more important than the things I thought I was doing back then. But like I was trying to make pedestal art back then. Like I was going to be an artist, you know?
Yeah. Like put on like, art showcases and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like talk about that. And I think that, my experience with that right after school, kind of like very quickly pushed me away from that side of things, because I before going to art school and then being at art school, I didn't really have a whole lot of exposure to like the fine art world. I knew I was interested in creativity and making stuff. And so then when I got out of school, and like participated in a couple group shows, and then I eventually landed a job working at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, doing mount making stuff, I got a lot more firsthand exposure to like what it takes to be like an artist, you know, like a capital A artist. And I quickly learned that like that wasn't for me. Like that's not the life I wanted to live. And so I worked that job at the museum, and I was pretty content doing that. It was a great job.
And what were you doing? You said you were mount making, like?
Yeah. So I worked I was in the art handling and installations department.
Okay, yeah.
And I worked between installations, conservation, curatorial departments, and installation design. And so like all these people would kind of come together with an object, so three-dimensional objects of some sort. Sometimes it was paintings too, but usually those are pretty straightforward, like you hang the frame on the wall.
That's so cool to think about, like you being able to, I don't know, I feel like people go to like these museums and stuff like that, and you see these like overall pieces of art, but that's cool that you kind of get behind the scenes and you're like part of like the installation of it all.
Hell yeah, it was amazing. It was if I had to do any job that I ever had, I would absolutely go back to that job. I worked kind of independently, but with all these cool people.
Yeah.
And I got to be just immersed in these amazing, most of what I was doing was for historic objects. You know, it was like mostly the historic stuff in the museum, which I've always been a little bit more interested in that side of, you know, what's on display at the art museum. But I got to do a pretty big overhaul of the arms and armor collection there, like the mounts that stuff was displayed with. So I got to like handle, you know, centuries old pieces of armor.
Wow.
And figure out different or better ways to put them on display. Because when they installed that stuff, I think it was in the 70s, and there just wasn't really a culture of mount making yet at that point. It was kind of just like get it on display by any means necessary. So they were like bending coat hangers and shit. And you know, kudos to them because they did a good job, but it wasn't necessarily the safest situation for the objects.
Yeah, they were just executing, you know, point A to point B.
Exactly, yeah. And so I got to work, I think I worked on that project for well over a year, and it wasn't exclusively on that project, but I would keep coming back to it, and that was just amazing, and that's really what sparked in me a lot of the foundation for the kind of the aesthetic approaches and the conceptual approaches to the Studebaker Metals stuff that we're doing now. It was like partially the efficiency and economy of effort in mount making. Like you don't want to see it, right? Like it is intended to disappear. And so you're designing with that level of minimalism in mind, really kind of like stretches your brain to think a little bit differently about how to do something. But then getting to handle these old metal objects that were pre-industrial, you know, and you see like, oh yeah, I know exactly how this was put together.
Yeah.
Because of my familiarity with the Metalsmithing toolkit.
Oh, that's
and so it
fascinating.
started to like turn these wheels in my head about like, you know, seeing like the way the hardware comes together on a piece of armor and being like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
It's still mind blowing to me. Like this is a crude comparison, but I just watched A Knight's Tale the other day.
Yeah.
And like, just like, you know, it made me think like, you know, back in the day with like the helmets that would close and like everything was so beautiful. And it's like, how did this get executed back in this time.
It's
and
crazy.
how it looks so beautiful. That's really cool to think about, like you having the experience, even as minimal as it was, with like the metalsmithing and being able to like look at these pieces. Whereas if you're like looking at a painting, like, you might look at a painting and be like, this is a great painting, but you can't look at it under that trained eye that you have with like the metalsmithing type of techniques.
It was like, it was tickling my brain in all the right ways.
How long was your schooling there?
I have a BFA in metalsmithing, so that was a 4-year degree from University of the Arts, and then I worked. First job out of school was bench jewelry. I did that for, I think it was only about 6 months. So
what's that?
Like I worked at a strip mall jewelry store in the back, and I was just doing like polishing, finishing, like the worst grunt work, and I was getting paid minimum wage. And I have like a 4-year degree in jewelry making. And it was an awful job, and my boss hated me. And he just like really put me through it there.
Just in the trenches.
Yeah. It was tough. But I had a buddy who was working at a welding shop not far from there, also in Delaware County, so outside of Philadelphia. So I was still living in Philly at the time. And he did custom architectural fabrication at a company that did like half of their stuff was spiral stair kits, where you just like, buy a spiral stair kit and install it wherever you're putting your spiral staircase. But then on the other side, they did custom stuff for like really high-end retail and restaurants. And so they were looking to bring in more people with this like art school metalsmithing sensibility to work in their fabrication shop. And so they brought me on with like I had like a little bit of TIG welding experience, but very, very minimal. I took one, 3-credit elective when I was in school. And they taught me how to TIG weld. They taught me how to use every tool that I needed to work there for 2 years.
And you brought in some of the outside of the box creativity, hopefully.
I mean, that was what was their hope, but they needed to retain in order for that to happen. And that was not the kind of job that retains people. It's just, it's no shade to the folks that were running that shop. And they had to do what they had to do. But it was like I would get to work at 5 a.m. and I would work until 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And I would come home, I would pass out on the couch, and my sibling would come in and take my boots off for me while I was sleeping. I'd wake up the next morning and just literally tie my boots back on and go back to work.
So you didn't really have any opportunity to like get creative and kind of like,
I was just welding and grinding and welding and grinding. And it was fascinating projects, challenging projects for sure. Like we did a staircase for the Louis Vuitton flagship store down in the city center in Vegas.
That's cool.
Yeah, super cool. Alyssa and I went and visited it not too long ago.
Still the same thing?
Still the same thing, yeah. It's like a high-polished stainless steel clad floating staircase that has these oak treads and glass, like, side rails.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's really beautiful, and it was really hard to build, and I wasn't like the lead on that project. I was just helping.
Still, though, that's neat.
Yeah, it was an awesome project. Taught me a lot about fabrication and problem solving and the toolkit too in general. But I was working that job and I was absolutely miserable, and I was looking for a way out, and I was like sitting at there was a little coffee shop on Ardmore Boulevard in Forest Hills. It's not there anymore. It was only there for a couple of years, I think. But I was home visiting my folks, and I was absolutely miserable, and I'm sitting there with my sibling, and they were just like, just start looking for other jobs, just like start looking around, see what's on the internet. And I'm scrolling Craigslist in Pittsburgh for Philadelphia jobs. And I see this job for the art museum, I was like mount maker and I'm on Craigslist. Like I found that job on Craigslist, which is wild to me at this point.
Yeah.
And I like sent in my resume, and they were like, oh yeah, you're like the perfect person for this job. You have the sensibilities of an artist because you went to art school, but you also have all of this kind of technical training that will allow you to do this stuff. And it was the first time that they had ever really hired specifically for a mount maker at the PMA. Like they had the position existed in a way, but it was kind of like an art handler would be the mount maker when they needed a mount maker.
Yeah.
And now they were like, no, we're going to have like a dedicated mount maker, and I'm pretty sure the reason they made that transition was because of that Arms and Armor project that was on the horizon. They knew they needed to get somebody in that could be focused on that project.
Is that still up there?
Yeah. The collection is, it's like their permanent collection of Arms and Armor.
Cool.
And I think the way that stuff works is like when somebody donates a big collection to the museum, they give all these like stipulations about like, this is how it must be displayed for this length of time. And so that, period of time was expiring, and it was like, we can now finally change the exhibition. And they didn't want to like super change it, they just wanted to freshen it up a little bit, and so they needed a mount maker on hand to
That's
do
awesome.
that. Yeah.
How long were you there?
3 years.
3 years. So I mean, like, as I was doing my research, it said while you were doing that stuff, you were at home, kind of hammering in the basement with some of that.
That was a little bit later. So when I ended up moving back to Pittsburgh, it was for family reasons, and it was very, very short notice. So I didn't line any work up. I just had like a very small amount of money saved up, and I was like, I'll just figure it out when I get home. Worst case scenario, I'll have a friend get me a job somewhere.
What year is this?
2013. So this is the beginning of 2013. I moved back, I want to say it was like the first week of February 2013. And I spent the month of February looking for jobs, applying to jobs. And then I think by the middle of March, I was out of money. And I was living at my parents' house. So I just needed to make sure I could still make the student loan payments and the car payments. But I did need to find something, and a buddy of mine worked at the Church Brew Works in Lawrenceville, and he was like, I think that I could probably, because he had a good relationship with his manager there. He was like, I think I could probably get you a job. And I had previously done like counter service kind of food service stuff, and so I just said that I had served at a Mexican restaurant. Actually, Baby Loves Tacos in Bloomfield, Zach, who runs that place, I went to high school with his younger brother, Caleb, and I've been friends with their family since I was, I don't know, in my early teens. Caleb was one of the people who I skateboarded and did graffiti and smoked cigarettes behind an office building with, So Zach Shell had a taco shop he was running out in Philly at the time. And so when I was working at the art museum, I did like 2 shifts a week rolling burritos for Zach out there. And so when I came back to Pittsburgh, I put that experience on my resume so I could get a job at the Brew Works, and then I waited tables until I started to hear back, and I got a few part-time temporary art handling gigs in Pittsburgh, but they weren't specifically mount making. It was just like putting the artwork on a cart, moving it through the building, and then hanging it on the wall, that kind of stuff.
Anywhere specific?
The Carnegie Museum of Art, and also the Miller Gallery at CMU. And I was like a not temporary employee at CMU. I was like a part-time, but year-round employee. But at the Carnegie Museum of Art, the way they have their art handling structured there is or at least at that time, at least half of the folks were just like temporary. So you would like come in for a couple weeks, work on a project, and then they'd call you when they needed you again.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. And it felt good to get some kind of integration or introduction to, like the art scene here in Pittsburgh, because I had spent the last decade in Philly, having gone to an art school, having a lot of friends still in Philly, and then working at the art museum. And I just like had that kind of exposure. And I came back to Pittsburgh and I didn't really have anything like that. And so it was good to get get exposed and get introduced to some folks.
So how do you start, making things like that?
That is a kind of around the same time, because it was the first time since graduating school in 2008 so this 2008 to 2013 doesn't sound like a long time now when I say it. It was only 5 years, but it felt like
back then.
It was a significant portion of my life. It was the first time I didn't have a job using any metal stuff, and so
what would you call it? Is it metalsmithing? What you do?
That's generally the term people use. Yeah, metalsmithing. It's kind of like like pulling from multiple types of metal work in no one specific application, and that's a term I think it's very specific to the the craft movement of the latter part of the 20th century in America. And that's a pretty cool story in and of itself. It's kind of like where the program that I studied in came from. If you're familiar with our slow is fast slogan, it's that was handed down to me by my professor. And she
like
got
that.
it. Yeah, it's great. It's great. And she got it from her teacher, who was a Marine. And it's an abridged version of slow is smooth and smooth is fast, which is a thing that the Marines say. And this context was like you had the GI Bill and these post-war veterans coming back, and a part of their reintegration and therapy after the war, World War II, was traditional handcraft, and it kind of like took off to the point where like then all of a sudden you had these like elevated craft programs emerging in like the 60s all across America, but most specifically kind of like in the Northeast region. And I know like Rochester Institute of Technology and RISD, University of the Arts. There's quite a few of these programs that kind of like all sprouted out of that same generation of these veterans who came back. They fell in love with this handcraft, and they took that passion and decided to kind of preserve and spread that, and created these programs. Unfortunately, most of those programs are under enrolled and then underfunded and then cease to exist. But that's how I was able to access this education. And man, that was a tangent.
That's all right. I love it because the slow is fast. That was something that I planned on touching on, because I really like the idea. Basically, I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's like, an attention to detail. It's like not rushing through things and just kind of taking your time and avoiding any sort of, mistakes along the way ahead of time.
Nothing slower than fucking up. Like, there is nothing
I love
that's
that.
gonna slow you down more than having to work backwards. So you just take your time and do it once,
Yeah, that's cool. Now, I mean, whenever you started this metalsmithing, I mean, this started in your basement?
The business. Yeah. So,
like, when does, like what makes you start it? Like, what makes you start just dabbling in this? And like, what was the first type of thing that you started working on?
So the beginning was the summer of 2013. My mom's health was declining, and when I first got back to Pittsburgh, I was spending a lot of time socializing, trying to reintegrate with other 20-something-year-olds. And at a certain point, she kind of like made the request that I like be home a little bit more, and I was like, absolutely. And so I just like shut off socially, and I was like, I'm gonna go to work and I'm gonna come home. But when I'm home, I might as well dabble. And so I would go down in the basement, tinker with stuff. I would come up, I would show my dad. And that's kind of when I started playing around with this, like the idea of making these very simple, very quick to produce cuff bracelets. And that just so happened to be the sweet spot on like Instagram for sharing that type of thing, right? And a lot of people were getting into like leathercraft and raw denim culture and all that stuff. And so there was this audience kind of that was already existing. And my buddy John, he was doing a company called Homestead Supply Company, and he was making wallets and belts and bags and things like that. And he was very, very encouraging to me that summer to come up with some ideas that those folks might be interested in. And so that's kind of where like the initial first cuff design, the first key holder design, it was kind of designed with that market in mind, right? And knowing that because there was an active environment already existing on Instagram that I could kind of like jump into there, it gave me like a great way to take all of these skills and sensibilities that I had acquired and assembled over the years and apply it to something purposeful, something that somebody might actually want to buy too, so that I could, make a living doing this. But nothing was super ambitious in the beginning, right? Like it was just dabbling here and there. I was kind of like just filling the time when I wasn't working my 3 part-time jobs. But it wasn't until October of that year that I met Alyssa, my partner, and she saw what I was doing and took a really strong interest in it. And
Her background is marketing, right?
Yeah. She had done about a decade in fashion marketing, basically. So she'd worked for a bunch of different companies, doing e-commerce and retail merchandising, and she was the photo art director at ModCloth. That's what brought her to Pittsburgh initially. And so we met. We actually met on Tinder, of all places.
Oh yeah, I met my wife on Facebook.
Oh yeah. That's as it works. Right?
It's almost weird to think about now, because it's almost weirder to think that people meet organically in the, like, oh, I met at a bar. That's like, a lost thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's good. Yeah, success story from Tinder and Facebook.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't even know what Tinder was.
Yeah.
My mom had just passed away, and I had reached out to a friend, and I was like, dude, I haven't been out in months. I don't even know how to have social interactions anymore. And he was like, dude, just download Tinder, and like it just takes out that kind of awkward first step part. And I mean, I knew that it was like a dating app. I didn't understand its kind of like context, right?
Yeah.
It's like what it actually was, the purpose it was serving for most folks at that time. As I downloaded the app, and I think like 16 hours later, I matched with Alyssa. And
really? That quick?
One of my first matches, if not my very first match.
That's awesome.
And I was on a double at the Church Brew Works, and I came out and I had like 8 unread Tinder messages, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And they were all from one person, and she had sent over like a, hey, how's it going? And then I didn't reply. And then the next message was like, oh, well, I'll just do some light Facebook stalking. And then the next message was like, oh, that one wasn't meant for you. It's like,
that's good though.
Yeah,
that's a good story.
Yeah, and it was like a very honest, very earnest way to meet somebody.
I missed Tinder. I don't know. I never downloaded it. Facebook. We met on Facebook before that, but it was just like, been with her ever since.
Yeah.
But it's refreshing to hear a success story. You hear so many tales of the negative end of it all, but that's cool. So you're down, wrenching, making this shit happen, and she's figuring out a way to, kind of put it out into the universe.
Yeah. The first time that she, I think, felt struck with the desire to collaborate, she came over, and this was maybe a couple weeks after we had met, and she knew what I was doing, and she had seen some photos and stuff.
What were you making at that time? Just the cuffs and a couple keychains?
I was working on an engagement ring for a friend that day, and so I had like a chunk of white gold, and I was forging it in the basement, and I was like setting, I forget what the stone was. It might have been a diamond that he sent me.
Did you like build your own forge in the basement?
I had a torch and an anvil, a vise, and a hacksaw, basically, and that was like pretty much my whole toolkit.
Making it work.
Yeah. I had a, how they make those discs that go in the drill for sanding.
Yep.
That was my sanding operation. I would just like clamp it between my legs and then use that as a disc sander.
Wow.
And that I made a lot of bracelets that way.
That's cool.
In the very beginning. But yeah, she came over and she saw what I was working on, and she was like, oh, this is cool. Like, people should see this. People should hear about this stuff. Like, there is an absolute story to tell here, and I'm like excited to tell this story. Why don't you let me, take some of this product, and I'll get some real photos taken of it? Because I was like I had a camera that I didn't know how to use, and I was building a GoDaddy website, and she was like, just stop, just go make stuff in the basement, and let me play around with this a little bit. And so basically, like 3 weeks after we met, we joined together in collaboration for the business, and from that point forward, kind of the whole thing has existed as like a consummate collaboration. And I really work well that way. Like, I love collaborating. I love working with other people, and it's just really rewarding to see what can happen when two different people come together, right?
Yeah, and cross-pollinate.
Right, yeah. It's like so much is possible. And obviously, like we've been at this for 11 years now, and I'm blown away by what we have accomplished.
Dude, you guys are ripping. I was in Columbus the other day into a store, and I walk in and I see a display case, and I was like, That looks like Studebaker, and it was Samson.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, "You want anything out of there?" And it was cuffs, and I was like, "Dude, I got all kinds of shit on."
That's awesome.
And he was like, "Oh yeah, you know about this?" I was like, "They're from my hometown," so it was cool to see that. That was like my first time in the wild, because I swear it was the day that you emailed me back.
Oh, that's crazy.
That we were walking around in there, and I was like, "That store's dope," selling Filson stuff like that. And I walk in there and I looked, and I was like, "This is like just such a weird coincidence." But yeah, it's cool to see some of that stuff. So how do you manage to, if you're making cuffs and like a ring here or there, and she's helping you get these product photos and get it out there, how do you kind of scale it up from there a little bit? Not necessarily to where it is now with this like, big storefront that you have and this crazy online presence, but how do you, take that next step from being in your basement by yourself, only making a couple things, to, being able to kind of start to produce these things to be able to sell them at retail?
Yeah, it's honestly like we dove right in, and that is 100% the Alyssa part of this collaboration, right? Is like, I think I had a novel idea about how to approach the process of making the stuff efficiently, right? I was like, I think I have an idea here that like we could sell this shit at a price point that will compete with things that are made in a completely different way. And inherently, by the way that we're making them, they're going to have a different perceived value, a different inherent value, right? Because we're doing this stuff one piece at a time, totally handmade, but it's going to be efficient enough that it can compete at a price point with the things that are being made in massive batches, maybe elsewhere, right? And I never really thought about scaling that quickly, but her first inclination was like, all right, we're going wholesale. So we have to price this stuff wholesale, because you need, in order to have any ability of sustaining and growing a business, you need to have a brand identity, and you can't do that by yourself, right? Like, you need to use wholesale partnerships to create a brand identity, create a reputation. So like what you just said, you went to Columbus, you saw something that we wholesale to a guy in Columbus, and that partnership and those partnerships have been so important to lending credibility to what we do, right? And creating context where a customer finds us and they can see, oh, they've done stuff with J. Crew, or, like their stuff is on Huckberry, or their stuff is in Samson and in Columbus. And so that was Alyssa's strategy from the get-go. She was like, we're going to wholesale trade shows. And she had walked those shows as a buyer. So she knew which shows to go to, and she knew how to present in those shows. And so like a really interesting approach that she took, and it's like, it's a simple idea, but it worked really well, is rather than going to a jewelry show, we went to a fashion show, and we went to like kind of like the weirdest of the fashion shows that's happening in Vegas, and we were in the sundries section rather than being in the accessories section.
What is sundries?
Sundries just means like miscellaneous goods, or miscellaneous things. So
it wasn't just a random accessory that's lumped under anything. It was like, almost its own lane.
Yeah, and the other things that like we always sat next to field notes, the little notebooks, and so we became really good friends with the folks who were at the booth from Field Notes. Still are friends with those folks. I really like them a lot.
What a fascinating sort of start to that. That's really cool that's how that was approached.
And so our first big order, she booked us a meeting at Urban Outfitters, and they ordered like 6,000 bracelets, and it was just me and her.
Shit.
And I was still working 3 part-time jobs.
Wait. So when this happens, you don't really have any sort of like inventory of anything.
Oh, no, nothing. Yeah.
So as a maker, as someone because you don't have anyone else that's making things, right?
No.
I mean, was that like terrifying?
I didn't have any money either. I was like broke. I had 3 jobs, and so it was absolutely terrifying. I sat down. There used to be where Millie's is in Shady Side. I forget what the name of the ice cream shop that preceded Millie's there, but there was this ice cream shop, and I sat down at this picnic table out front with my two buddies, and I was like, I don't think I can do this, guys. Like I'm terrified. And they were like,
6,000 is insane.
Yeah, it's
like
insane.
that's just like if you were going to say 600, that would be somewhat manageable. But I feel like 6,000 is like I would be crippled with anxiety.
Same. Yeah, 100%. And so it was that crippling fear of anxiety with Alyssa's like just utter confidence that like, oh yeah, we're just going to do it. You know what I mean? And so those two things kind of always come together and yield pretty successful results because
kind of balance each other out.
I gotta execute, or I can't fail.
Well, how do you approach that? As someone who just has this little studio in their basement.
Long days. I quit my jobs and I lived lean for about 2 months. And I would get up early. I would go down to the basement. I would make bracelets until I was about to pass out, and then I would go pass out, and I would do the same thing again. So I was probably working like 16-hour days.
Is this just one style of bracelet?
It was like 3 styles of bracelet, or four variations on the bracelets.
Okay.
So we have like our classic cuff that's just kind of like just a square cross section, and then the Studebaker cuff, which is the square cross section that's twisted.
Yeah.
So it was like a brass and silver version of each of those cuffs.
And how long does it take you to execute? How many were you making in a day?
I think I was probably outputting somewhere in the area of like 35 to 40 cuffs a day.
Okay. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah. Which is a rate at which like the quality was not what it is. Our standards for quality back then were not the same because we were trying to get the project done.
For sure.
And honestly, like there are definitely people out there who like the way those cuffs look, right? Like the symmetry is off. The stamp placement might be a little crooked.
Yeah.
They look very much handmade. You know? For me, I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's so cringy. I can't believe I was okay shipping that to them. But it does. It kind of like places itself right at the beginning. You know what I mean? Like this, you can look at that and you'll know like this is where this started. And now look at it compared to what we do now.
Yeah.
And just hammered away, and that was the whole thing, right? For me, the business idea was like, I'm going to take a piece of wire and I'm going to apply 10 minutes of labor to it, and then it's going to be a bracelet. And I can do that because of this experience that I have and this toolkit that I am aware of. I didn't have the whole toolkit yet, and I've been continuing to build that toolkit. But it was like a simple transformation of material where I can hold inventory of just brass wire, which is not very expensive.
Yeah.
And then the expensive part of it is me applying that labor, right? And me turning it into something with this artisan sensibility and artisan execution.
And your previous jobs allow you to develop that sort of efficiency.
Yeah.
And, that sort of like, for lack of a better term, your business smarts to be able to like kind of execute that in an efficient way. Man, that's fucking awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah. It's really wild how it all kind of comes together.
So I would imagine, if you get a job from Urban Outfitters, which is a huge brand, obviously, 6,000 pieces, that's enough to like, kick you in the ass and be like, this is a real thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as soon as we got paid for that order, we found space outside of my dad's basement and set up a studio, hired somebody. And that's when we started going to the trade shows because we had money, right? We started the business with $0.
Yeah.
I had a small collection of tools and a pile of brass, and I wasn't paying rent because I was in my dad's basement. And so the business was literally built from a pile of brass and some rusty tools.
I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, and so we.
So if you get this new space, what as a maker, what are your eyes set on for your first tool to acquire to make your business a little bit more efficient?
A belt sander. Yeah, because I was still doing the thing with the the drill pinched between my knees.
Wow.
Actually, I did get the belt sander for the Urban Outfitters job. I could justify $120 belt sander from Home Depot. But it was like I got a better belt sander. I got a better buffing motor because I had like Harbor Freight tools when we first started because I was just trying to. I actually met with a guy. Brian Fisher, who he was a business consultant, and he was just kind of taking me under his wing because he felt bad for me because he knew I was like going through it, and so he was entertaining, kind of like sure, yeah, you're gonna have a business, and the first thing he said to me was like, always focus on revenue first, like don't even start thinking about expenses until you have revenue figured out. And I mean, it's like a very simple concept, but it makes all the sense in the world. It's like, what am I doing budgeting for all my tool expenses when I don't have any orders? Like, get the orders, sell the stuff, and then start spending the money.
Yeah.
And that's how we've always kind of approached it, is get paid and then reinvest that into the business.
So whenever you decide to move out of your dad's basement, was that the Braddock location?
No, we were in Wilkinsburg for a year before we made it to Braddock.
Okay.
Right on Penwood Avenue along the train tracks in Wilkinsburg, kind of where Wilkinsburg and Edgewood come together.
Yeah.
And it's the old Hayes Publishing Building. So I believe they did publish school books there originally, but it was recently acquired by a landlord that has a reputation for not being the best landlord in the area. So they had done nothing to it. I think they sprayed the walls white, like literally. That's all they did. And Alyssa always cites it as having a dirt floor. And we were on the second story, so it was a concrete floor, but it was buried under so much filth that it was like being on a dirt floor. Like there was a deep layer of dirt above the concrete.
Wow.
And so we worked in that shop for a year.
What did that first year look like as far as like order wise? Because if you executed the Urban Outfitters order, I mean, are you guys getting more orders right after that?
Yeah, I mean, we rolled it right into trade shows, right? So we I think January, that order shipped probably in September, October. By January, we were in Vegas at a trade show.
And what are you presenting there? Are you only presenting like the cuffs and some keychains? Like, when did you start to like really delve into the extra stuff? Like you guys do, these great rings, and when does that come into play?
It started out mostly with cuffs. There was a few kind of carry items, like a keychain. We had a mustache comb in the beginning.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I did this was ridiculous. I'm actually like, I don't like talking about it. We made a 3-piece safety razor. Entirely handmade from like raw material, right? So there's like no dyes, no molds, no tools to make the process efficient. So I would spend like, I think somewhere between 16 and 18 hours putting together one safety razor, right? Which is crazy. Like you can't scale a business that way, but it looked nice. Yeah. Kind of, from my perspective, it looked okay, but from a lot of people, they were like, wow, this is neat, and
absolutely.
It was never intended to be like a marketing tool or ploy, right? Like I was genuinely trying to make a thing that I thought somebody might want to buy. And then we took a photo of it and we presented it at this trade show. And somehow, I'm not 100% sure how it ended up happening, but Maxim magazine saw this razor and they were like, we're going to put a little page in Maxim about this. And
no
so they
shit.
did, and that's like, this is like 2013, 2014, where existing on Instagram, and there was, and not everything was monetized yet at that point. You know what I mean? And so there were like blogs and accounts that were just interested in like talking about stuff and sharing.
Yeah. Whereas like now on Instagram, you could click on the post and it'll come up with a link and you can just buy right from there.
And that's how we make a lot of our sales. And that's a big part of our business at this point. But yeah, it used to be a space of creative sharing, and now it's kind of like it's like a shopping center. But no shade, it's where I make my money. It's how the business has been able to survive post pandemic, because that was a rough experience as a small business owner. So it's sorry, I have more to say about that.
No, that's
that
all right.
Topic, but we can maybe get to that later.
Rewind a little bit back to your first. You were in this like crazy ass space, and you were there for a year. Yeah. And we were talking about kind of like the expansion beyond like the just cuffs.
Yeah. That again, consummate collaboration. It was always like the way we design. Our design process has always been kind of Alyssa as the person who's paying attention and understands what's going on in the market, right? In general, she'll identify a product category like a type of product. Like, what is it that we are missing right now that we have an opportunity to design with? And then she'll pull together some inspiration, so other objects, maybe historic versions or, just references for us to look at. And then from there we go and we start designing, and so that's always been the process for adding new products in. And we were really, in the early days, focused on like, what about this razor situation? What about this shave brush? Thinking that was kind of the path forward. And it wasn't until probably maybe 3 or 4 years in that we were like, I actually think that we need to focus this in on just the jewelry stuff and start developing more traditional like rings and things like that. Because I think our first signet ring, we had already existed for probably 5 or 6 years before we released our first version of a signet ring, and now it's one of the best-selling products that we make.
And it's obviously way easier than making a 3-piece safety razor.
Yeah, and it makes a lot more sense because there's a better market for it too. Like I think we sold that razor for $800, which is just absurd to me. I'm so grateful for the folks that did buy it, and I do believe that the folks who bought it enjoy it. They love it, right? And it's special because it is labored.
Like, were you making a lot of those?
I think I made about a dozen of them.
Okay, yeah.
Over the course of maybe 3 years.
Yeah, that's cool though. I mean, that's cool that those are out there in existence.
Yeah.
You have one still yourself?
I have like the prototype. It's not a very functional prototype, and I definitely got better. Each time I made one, it was a little bit nicer, functioned a little bit better than the one before. But again, I didn't have the geometry in a tool, right? Every time I had to make the blade bend the way that the blade needs to bend, I had to like do that by tweaking it. Each single one had to be like tuned, right? And that's just like, that's not a great way to make a thing. But we stopped selling that because I think we had a fraud order go to the UK. Somebody ordered 2 of them, and I was like, oh my God, somebody ordered 2 razors. We shipped them to the UK, and then got a charge back, and I was like, 32 hours of my life gone for free.
That's terrible.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But
live and you learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it functioned really well to get us on a page in Maxim and get people talking about it. I think that's probably how Huckberry found out about us.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool thing.
Yeah, it's a good partnership, and Huckberry, we've been working with them for almost a decade now at this point, on and off. There have been moments where a couple seasons would go by and we wouldn't be shipping anything to Huckberry, but again, that's like, they do such a good job of presenting the products that they're selling to their customers. It's not just like, hey, buy this. It's like, look at this thing. Let's talk about it, right? Like, let's understand it. Let's appreciate it. And that's the type of brand building that, like, I can't place a value on that relationship. It's really, really, it's done a lot to give us credibility and give us stability.
Yeah. So you being in there in that first spot for a year, how do you get out of there and move over to Braddock?
That we knew we wanted to get out of that building because we didn't have a great relationship with the landlord, and we knew it wasn't going to improve. And so we started looking around at what our options were, and we were still receiving some income from the Urban Outfitters order because they had done a design fee, basically. So they had like a costume jewelry plant up in New York manufacture a necklace that we designed.
Okay.
And so they were just making it out of cheaper materials and less artisanal, execution, but it was similar to a necklace that we had designed, and we were getting like a design royalty basically every time they would reorder those. And so we knew that we had enough money that we could like make a move, and that was like a wise way to invest it. And we had no idea what like commercial real estate, it's a whole nother world. And we ended up buying this house in North Braddock because it was big. It was like a 3,000 square foot Victorian, and it was affordable, and it needed everything. It was abandoned, and so we knew that we had to do everything to it. But our honest reason, or I guess like part of the logic behind buying this house was, we'll just put the shop in the garage, right? It's got a 3-car garage. It's got like a mud room between the house and the garage. Like we could build a small shop there. We'll just figure it out. And then we like dug in, we started doing demo, and it was like, there's no way we have the budget to turn this into a usable workshop.
Yeah.
And so one day I think I had just finished like tearing Celotex out of the basement. It was all saturated with mold. and I'm completely filthy. And I go down to the Brew Gentleman, he's right down the hill from his house, and a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, you should check out this space at the end of the block because they're like currently renovating this building, and I think it's going to be like pretty affordable rent." So the next day I reached out to the landlord. It was Mon Valley Initiative, which, you know, it's like cool to deal with a nonprofit as your landlord too. And yeah, next thing you know, we were signing a lease to get into that building, because again, it was perfectly renovated, recently renovated. They hadn't finished the renovation before we signed the lease.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to do all that build out to make it a usable space.
Better people to work with.
Yeah. And it was a perfect space for us because it had like a retail space overlooking a loading dock, and we actually walked into that room, and the wall between the two spaces was just framed in. And Alyssa was like, "Oh, I love that there's a window here." And the contractors were like, "Oh, there's no window here." And she's like, "Oh, well, there should be a window here." And they were like, "Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, if you sign the lease, then we'll put a window there." And then, so we had this observation window looking down into the shop.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was really, really perfect. And I loved that building very, very much. And it was a great place for us to grow the business.
How long were you guys there?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from your time there in 8 years, I mean, I assume that the internet and being like the online shop that it is, and that sort of, you know, kind of progressing and manifesting into what it is now is, you know, one of the big reasons that you guys, you know, kind of gained some steam.
Definitely. Yeah. And that was always what made sense about being in Braddock for us. It was like we were primarily, when we started, focused on wholesale, and that was our main focus up until 2019, basically. And we always wanted direct to customer to take off, right? Because it's a better margin if you're selling direct to the customer.
Yeah.
But it's really it's expensive to sell direct to the customer. You have to spend a lot of money on marketing, and you have to be smart about how you're presenting the products. So we knew that we didn't need retail, like in-person retail, to be, it was never even a part of the plan. We just opened a retail space in Braddock because we had it. We were like, should this be office space or retail space? Well, it's kind of nice to have it be retail space. So let's like put the office in the closet, and then we'll just like actually set up a showroom here. And we treated it like a showroom for the first year or so. And then over the years, we built it out to be a more inviting and more compelling space to bring folks in for actual in-person shopping.
Yeah, like a curated, like more of an experience to come in.
Yeah, and it was, I think it was probably around 2018 that 2019, we did a little bit of a renovation job, and they like changed the paint colors, changed the floor, got some new fixtures, and we're like, if we're going to have this be a retail space, let's make it feel like a real, intentional retail space.
Yeah.
And so that was good preparation for what we were going to then later do when we moved to the Strip.
Yeah, like what makes you move?
Space. That was the biggest thing. So 2019, we go to the trade shows in August, and it's an absolute bust. We don't write a single order in Vegas, and I'm like so anxious about this because I'm crippling fear of failure, and then Alyssa's blind confidence is like, it doesn't matter. We're just going to reallocate that budget instead of going to trade shows every season. We're done with trade shows; they're dead. We're going to put that money into direct to customer marketing through social media, and that's going to be fine. Then we're going to make this pivot now. You know, we're at that point, 6 years in, you know, we've done the brand building that we have done for the last 6 years. And let's just make this pivot. Little did we know that like in 6 months, 5 months, the whole world was going to shut down.
Yeah,
right.
It's crazy.
And so I always talk about this as being wild. Like we normally would go to shows in January. So we would have been in Berlin. We would have been in Florence.
You guys were going over all of these seas and what?
Yeah. And
was that like a big market overseas?
that was more brand building overseas. Like we sell overseas. We've got distribution in Japan. And
that's awesome.
So we have a showroom there. Yeah, I love them, and it's been really, really great for us. And we've always had a really decent market in Japan. There's a good appreciation for like heritage Americana stuff. And so, and also just generally like craft and manufacturing are very important to Japanese culture in general, right? Like, obviously. And so I think that always kind of lent itself to a good place for us to be. And then this partner that found us 2 years after we started reached out. They said, can we have one of everything? We're going to put your stuff in a showroom. And I was like, I don't know. Like, this seems a little sketchy. Decided eventually, like, let's just, blind faith, like, because we weren't charging them for the samples. We were just sending one of everything that we make. That's a lot of stuff.
And if people bought it there, you would just make it and ship it over?
No, it was a wholesaler arrangement. And so they take this order, and then probably about 4 months later, out of the blue, I hadn't heard from them in 4 months, they send over an order, and it's like, here's a 300-piece order for all these small boutiques all over Japan that they had aggregated these orders for. And so we were like, oh, okay, this is different, and so then we got to swing in. I think that was when we hired our second employee.
That's awesome.
Was when we started that relationship. And so we have distribution in Hong Kong as well. And we have a few boutiques remaining in Europe. Not a lot, because the VAT tax situation over there has been very prohibitive. Basically, like, pretty much all of our accounts tried to make it work, but there's like a 20 to 24% tax on the stuff when it shows up. Yeah. And so they've got to pass that off to their customer. Yeah. And it's just like, it makes the stuff a little bit out of the price point that it's supposed to be existing. For sure. But yeah, we have a little bit of distribution over there, but the main point of going to Berlin and going to Florence was to see what was going on in the market, mingle, be inspired, show our stuff. And we would write a few orders, that's how we got those European accounts. But really it was enrichment for us as a creative entity, to go explore and be inspired.
That's really, really cool.
But yeah, we would have gone to these shows in January of 2020 and wrote orders, right, and maybe cut material, and then all of a sudden everything gets shut down. And most of our wholesale stuff was domestic, so like we very much possibly could have been like totally screwed. Yeah, had we gone with our normal system, right, of like spend $20,000 on going to these trade shows, write the orders, that gets you through a season, and then you spend another 20 grand going to trade shows. But instead we took that 20 grand and then the next 20 grand, and instead of spending it on trade shows, we put it into targeted ads. And right in the middle of February of 2020 was when our like ad funnel had finally started to get traction. And it was just nuts. I mean, we were just blasted with orders like the next day, and it's like, wow. That we always talk about Grandma Cindy energy, my mom's kind of presence in our life, right? So my Alyssa and I met 3 weeks after my mom passed away. The reason I came back to Pittsburgh was to be with her. The reason I followed my artistic passions was because of her encouragement. The reason I bought an 1874 Victorian was because I knew she would have bought that house if she had the opportunity. And all these things, all these little pieces. And so when shit like that happens, where you're like, how do we dodge that bullet? And not only dodge the bullet, but like, beautiful. This launched us forward, right? Like this launched us forward. There's something going on there, and like maybe it's just like the hologram principle or manifestation, but also maybe there's something spiritual going on there.
Yeah, I like that. That's how I would rather look at it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's very, very cool. So I mean, like 2020 comes, the world shuts down. I mean, does that? I feel like as far as like a negative to your business, it's like people are more reserved on like spending these funds just because everything's up in the air. But how does that really make an impact on your business as far as COVID and everything shutting down? It
honestly almost exclusively was a positive. Now there was the wholesale side of things, right? We sold to brick and mortar boutiques all over the country.
So that makes a point.
And most of those companies weren't placing orders, right? A lot of them never placed another order after that, right? That was kind of the end of it for them. Either the end of it with us or just the end of it in general. And obviously we didn't have people coming to the storefront, but that was never really a huge part of the business model anyways. But what you did have was like passionate, really compassionate consumers out in the world looking for businesses that they believed in and saying like, I am going to do whatever I can right now to make sure these businesses still exist, right? And so people really fucking showed up. And like we were paying Facebook and Instagram to get our ads in front of people, and that was definitely helping get people visibility. But I think the conversion side of it, like people deciding to buy the stuff, people signing on, because a lot of I think we have like a 43% customer retention rate on Shopify, which is like, to me, feels mind-blowing. Like the 43% of our orders are from repeat customers. And that is like the most humbling and honoring thing that I could say to you. Like I am so grateful that we have found so many people who are enthusiastic about what we're doing, because we can't do it without support, right?
I mean, I genuinely like I love the stuff that you make. Like,
Thank you.
Like it's all.
I can tell. Yeah, you're decked out.
I'm decked out on it, but it's like, and I think it all really, it all comes down to it being like, I love the story overall. I love the slogan that they don't make it like I used to, but Studebaker does. Like that's dope. And I just like you said, it all kind of comes down to like the compassion of other people. It's like you want to cultivate these types of businesses that are in your city, and you want to keep them sort of, alive and keep chugging along, because it's so few and far between. And even now, 2025, I feel like the generation that we're in, the 30-year-olds, specifically like the 30-year-olds and younger 40-year-olds, it's like we have this like mindset where it differs from our parents, because our parents are always about saving a buck and like kind of just like being efficient with their money and stretching a dollar.
You're talking my language.
But it's like my parents think I'm fucking insane if I want to go and like go spend a good dollar on like a good meal or like buy like a Filson jacket, like something like that that's just like a quality piece. But it's like it's even better whenever it's like a small business that you could kind of like reinvest in. To kind of ensure those people stay woven into the fabric of the community.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was a little nervous that I might be too eager to dive into this type of topic, because I think about this shit all the time. When I'm working, I listen to a lot of stuff, and what I listen to mostly for the last couple of years has been like economic theory stuff, and just kind of like social sciences in general. But I agree with you. Like our generation, there's been a massive shift in consumer values, and I am firsthand experiencing that, and I am living a life that is made possible by that shift in consumer values. And you hit it right on the head. Like our parents' generation, through whatever, right? Through however they ended up there, their main value, their main priority as consumers was find the thing for the least amount of money possible. And I genuinely think that like I used to have this belief that what destroyed the middle class in America was deindustrialization, which I'm not saying that didn't play a part in it, but I actually think what destroyed the middle class in America was that exact notion, right? Is like, you cannot exist, you cannot sustain an ecosystem of small businesses if the only priority for the consumer is to find the cheapest option.
Absolutely, because the only person that's putting out the cheapest option are these big fucking organizations. So, man,
there's no small business involved there, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's it. Like you and I, and the people who are passionate about coming back to Studebaker and getting another gift for another loved one, right? Like those folks who they genuinely want to see us do well. And that has been an experience I've had in Pittsburgh in general from the very beginning. It's like people do genuinely want to see us succeed. And I'm so grateful for that. But it's that choice. It's people repeatedly making that choice that is shifting the ability for people to do this. And I think that that's so important. And there's definitely like, there's something really meaningful about that shift in consumer priorities. And coupling that with the democratization of commerce through the internet, right? Like, we also wouldn't be able to exist if we couldn't get a beautiful looking website without having to hand code that, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we use Shopify.
Yeah.
Shopify is a great platform for small businesses to present their product. And
that's what my website's on.
Yeah.
They make it easy for, the smaller person to be able to, like you said, showcase what they want to do, whether, whatever style they want to do it in. They give you the ability to really, like, be the one that has their hand on it, rather than like, they give you creative freedom to do this however you want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it's empowering, and I'm super I'm excited about Shopify for that reason. And like, they are value extracting in whatever ways that they need to make their business work, and they are data harvesting in the ways that they need to make their business work. And so I definitely I don't love everything about the experience, right? But that is a part of the context that makes it possible for more people to start small businesses.
Absolutely.
And the more people that start small businesses, the more ability we have to support a better try not to use any buzzwords here, but like, there's a class implication to that, right? And it's like, and the implication is we can support something in between poverty and wealth by finding opportunities to support small businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, like we have very similar ways of thinking with that. It's cool to hear it from, a business owner like yourself. And it's cool to hear your story and like how that kind of, carries that through line of like, what you tried to establish in the beginning and how you manage that growth and how you, keep that same sort of like, handmade in the basement type of feel through being able to grow this into a successful business that it is. And it's just, that's literally why I started this podcast, dude, is to really like find out how these people went about these things and why they went about them more than anything, because I'm just someone who like really is passionate about like putting back into the community, and I don't really have a tangible thing that I'm putting back into the community, but I feel like the podcast is something that is a help for the people that are like-minded to kind of give people a glimpse into why these things are like that. And it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to expand on ideas, right, and share ideas, but also there, it creates space for discourse. It creates space for just information to be shared, which is important. That was we got tangential off of the we were talking about retention rate, which is but it's a beautiful thing. And I mean, if you guys made products that sucked, people wouldn't come back. So it speaks in itself. But it's cool, so you expanding from Braddock into this new space that you're in. That opened in April. April 18th was the date we moved, and then we did like a soft opening June 1st for the retail side of things, and our grand opening was September 21st, I think it was. But the retail space is beautiful. Thank you. Like it's really a beautiful experience in there. Like I went in there 2 days after Christmas. That was my first time going in. My wife got me a gift card and went in there, and just like the way you put it together in there is like really, really beautiful. I love to be able to see everything in the back, like you were talking about and it's cool to hear that you had the window in Braddock to where you could see through it. And now it kind of carries that same sort of feel within the new space where you could, have your time to, shop the retail end of it all, but also see what's going on back there. One of my favorite things to do is take people back and give tours.
experience,
dude. I mean,
it.
I already planned on trying to ask you to get me back.
Oh,
in
yeah,
there.
yeah,
That's
anytime.
the best part
Come
about this podcast is like I get in there, I'm touring dairies and like doing all these wild ass things, breweries and everything, and it's really cool. And I heard that you guys are starting to offer classes as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm definitely into that. Someone who I posted a picture on Instagram that I was at your spot, and a guy that follows me. And we're buddies. He was like, dude, I just took a class there.
Oh, cool.
And I guess it was the first class that you guys did, because I was asking your employee, Shelby. Shelby. I was talking to her about it because I didn't know that you guys did that, and she was like, it was our first one, and I was like, I need some information because that's like right up my alley.
Awesome.
Like,
yeah. It was the first, and part of the reason we wanted to move was space, right? I had mentioned before we had run out of space, and the propulsion forward we got from that 2020 transition, we had to hire a bunch of people to keep up with our order demand, and we were elbow to elbow in Braddock, and so it was like we need more space. But every year we talked about the educational side of things, because like I said before, I wanted to go to school so that I could become a teacher. I love sharing and I love collaborating and being excited about this stuff with somebody.
Yeah.
And so we walked into that room and it was like, well, now we finally have the headspace and the room to say like, yes, please come in. This will be an enjoyable experience. It won't feel tight. It won't feel cramped. It won't feel unsafe. And the building itself is such a beautiful building.
Yeah, what was it before?
It was built in 1903 as a part of the Crucible Steel plant. The plant was massive. I think it was like 30th Street all the way up to 32nd, from Smallman Street all the way down to the river. So it was a very, very big plant. Crucible was formed as a merger of 13 small regional producers as they were trying to remain competitive with U.S. steel. And they specialized in high carbon tool steel. So they were making special alloys of high performance materials, not like structural stuff. Like U.S. Steel, Carnegie, they were making rail and items. This was like they were making stuff to make tools out of. And they actually have invented thousands of alloys, and they're still in business. They're up in Syracuse, New York, but they shut down the Pittsburgh operation in, I think, sometime in the 60s, probably, like early 1960s.
And how did you guys end up finding that spot?
Amazing story. Another one of those fortuitous events. So we started the process of searching, I would say about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Just kind of like every time an opportunity would show up, we would go check it out.
Yeah.
And we had got real excited about several properties.
Like where could Studebaker have been? What was the closest that it could have been somewhere else?
We made an offer on a building in East Liberty, across from where the old Whole Foods was.
Yeah.
But it was not a great opportunity for us. It was just a building that we maybe could have afforded, but like the build out would have been really challenging and it would not have provided a great retail space.
Dude,
but
the vibe that you guys are in now,
it's so perfect.
The vibe is so sick.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, really, really cool.
So we eventually linked up with a real estate agent. He put together a list of properties that might work for us. And we initially were thinking like maybe we should buy something because that's like the financially responsible thing to do. Is like find the building you can afford and invest in commercial real estate. But we're also not business people. Like I have an art school background and I am a creative person, and Alyssa has a creative writing degree and is a marketer, and neither one of us are business brained, right? And so that has been such a huge advantage to us in so many ways, because I think that we approach things in a slightly more
reserved.
No, I would say the opposite. Like a person who, like a smart business person, might not make some of the decisions that we've made over the years.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But we're not smart business people. We are
just like, fuck it,
we're
let's
just
make
like,
it
fuck
happen.
it, let's do it, right? Yeah, exactly. And so I'm super grateful that she has brought that energy to the table, because that's not me naturally, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go out and be like, yeah, 6,000 bracelets, no problem. You know, I was like seriously about to say no to the order, and here we are, 11 years later. But we were talking about how we found that building.
Yeah.
So we
hired a real estate agent.
He put together a list of 10 properties, and then the owner of the building that we're in caught wind that we were in the market, and he was familiar with our company, and he reached out to our real estate agent and was like, hey, I think your clients would be really interested in my building.
No shit.
And fucking we walked in the door, and it was like, all right, call off all. It was the first stop on the tour. And I was like, I guess we'll go look at these other buildings, right? Like we booked the time with the real estate agent, so let's go look at them all and be sure. But like, there's no way anything could possibly ever be better than this building. You know, it was the exact right size. It was the exact right configuration. It had like just the right amount of retail, just the right amount of office, and then like a massive amount of just open, beautiful production space. And the landlord, the reason it was available to us was because they prioritized the use of the space. He was very clear with me that like he had refused offers to sell the building for people who wanted to level it and build condos. He had refused offers for people who wanted to buy it and turn it into a brewery. And he was determined to find a light industrial use for the building because he was proud of the fact that that building was built in 1903 and was in uninterrupted industrial use its entire life, which is a very uncommon story for a piece of architecture in Pittsburgh. You know, there's definitely some of them, right? But like preserving that part of our cultural heritage,
that's awesome.
Was important to him, and it's so aligned with what we do. You know?
That's so cool.
Yeah, and I'm super. I feel privileged to go to work there every day. It's a really, really wonderful space, and it's not just the fact that it's like we're in Pittsburgh. This is an old steel mill building, and it has that. It's like the type of product that was being made in that building, or it was the plumbing workshop that serviced the mill, but that operation down there, they were making the things. Like the materials that were going to then be turned into these antique tools that we have collected. And so there's this beautiful continuity there too.
Yeah.
We like filled a building.
Carries the same energy.
Yeah.
It's so cool because I was fascinated to read that it says that you have tools that are over 3 centuries.
One
that
fits that bill. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's awesome that that you utilize these things, and there's because I see all the stuff that you have in there, and I'm sure that over the years you've acquired these things, but it's just the vibe. Now that you explain the origin story of how you got it, the vibe of it all kind of all comes together, and it makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Yeah. I like to refer to it as like it's partly an artisanal workshop and partly a living history museum. And like we talked about before, like I've always had a huge fascination in the historical context, the historic objects, and so like surrounding myself with those old things just feels good, and it also makes it so that they're tools, right? They are tools. They are usable, functional tools. And so when you use an antique tool to make something, the result will be similar to the antique things that those tools originally made. And that's just how input output,
Absolutely.
And so I like a lot of our stuff kind of feels like an instant antique, and that's because it's made with the materials running through the processes on these tools that are all obsolete technologies that we have collected and activated in our space.
Hell yeah. And I mean, you walk in your retail space and it's pretty impressive on how many different pieces that you have and you've developed over time. And I mean, obviously that's probably part of the fun of it all is being able to just get in there and figure some stuff out.
Yeah.
I love the new collection, the Lovers collection with everything. And I don't know, it's just, you offer some sort of a unique take on things that really it really exudes your history as far as being involved in the arts and everything like that. It's cool to hear how everything kind of came to be.
Thanks, man.
What are your goals? Obviously you're new. It's fresh still.
Yeah.
This new spot, but what are your goals?
To survive. Definitely I would say that being a small business is difficult, you know, and we've managed to do a lot. And so my main goal is like, let's just keep fucking going. Let's just keep one foot in front of the other and just keep doing it. I do think that a big goal is to increase the in-person retail aspect of what we do and also the educational aspect of what we do. Both of those operations are less dependent on social media marketing, right? It would be nice to kind of shift a little bit away from how much we have to invest in that.
Yeah.
And also for me, after spending 8 years nose to the grindstone, just like at work all of the time, and work was in Braddock, and Braddock is far away, and I didn't get a lot of visitors, and I didn't get a lot of people just popping in. And we definitely had customers come through, and I had great visits with folks out there, but it wasn't the same sense of integration into the greater creative community in Pittsburgh that we are now feeling in the Strip District, where like, it's not like almost every day somebody pops in, you know? It's great.
It's more accessible.
Yeah. I feel like a part of a community, and I want to continue to feel like I am contributing and a valuable member of that community. I'm not just trying to make stuff and sell it. Like, I want this whole thing from, you know, sharing in the experience of like coming into the space, teaching people very, very minimally if it's just in a tour, but also maybe like teaching somebody some hand skills in a class, and being a resource. Somebody popped in the other day, and it was like maybe one of the best experiences of my professional career thus far. It was a guy who was walking by. He saw the side of the building, hand forged jewelry. So he popped his head in, and he was blown away because he had moved to Pittsburgh 5 years ago. And he moved here from Atlanta. And when he was in Atlanta, he had started kind of dabbling, making jewelry in his basement. And I guess Atlanta has a jewelry district, like a lot of big cities do, where you can kind of like go in, you can buy materials, you can buy supplies, you can talk to an old head about what you might need to do to finish a project. But that doesn't really exist here in Pittsburgh. There's a very small remnant of that in the Clark building downtown, which it's cool that there's still anything left there. But in other bigger cities, there are like these places that you can go. And this guy was so excited to see that we had opened up right down the street from where he works, and that like I had all these books laying out on the table, and I was like, yeah, come in, tell me your problem. I'll help you troubleshoot it. Like, let's figure out why the white gold split when you rolled it out. And so that experience, it was like, that this is great. Like, this is what I'm here for. You know, I was like, I'm here so that Anthony can come back, and we're going to figure out why his white gold split.
Scratches that itch of being the art teacher that you thought you were going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
To bringing it all home to, you know, creating, you know, what you did in your basement into this, like, you know, massive scale.
Thanks, man.
Unreal story.
Thanks,
like,
dude.
absolutely unreal story. Even cooler, you know, like, I'm a fan of the stuff that you do, obviously, but it makes it so much, you know, for me to be able to have the opportunity to have people come into my home and sit down with me and tell me these things and really get into the weeds with it all. It's like, you know, I mean, I almost get emotional whenever I talk to these people about things, because you're going to be, I've almost talked to 300 people in the city,
Wild.
300 community members in the city of Pittsburgh that like really, and they're not just like, you know, the fucking, you know, the low hanging fruit. It's like, I'm talking to like, you know, everyone.
Yeah.
And to be able to like have these experiences and these conversations, and it's just, I don't know, dude, it just speaks. It just, I don't know, motivates me beyond, you know, anything I could ever say. And it's cool to be able to kind of just have these opportunities, because, you know, if I met you at a brewery somewhere and, you know, I noticed you from Instagram, it would be fucking weird for me to go over and just bug you for 2 hours
right
about what you do. And it probably wouldn't be the best experience. But
I mean, I would absolutely.
I mean, you would probably love that, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, you know, to be able to like, you know, have an opportunity to have these people come in and know what they're about to do, and like give people like yourself like a platform and an opportunity to really just like like talk about their passions till at length. It's like,
it's amazing.
I love
you
it,
have
dude.
a conversation with somebody, like
I
a
love
real
it.
conversation. It can really, there's a lot that can happen.
Absolutely. Okay, so you think there's anything I missed as far as Studebaker Metals? You ready to get to the ending segment?
I think we probably hit all the important.
I think we
stuff.
pretty thorough.
We got a lot of
it was
stuff
pretty
in
good,
there.
dude. It was pretty thorough.
I'm feeling good about it.
Okay, so ending segment that I do with everyone is an ending segment called Desert Island Questions.
Okay.
So I ask these people, we talk about like, your life's work, obviously, and what you do and your metalsmithing and like, everything you're doing, but you don't really have an opportunity to, color in the extra. So Desert Island Questions, whenever I give each guest 3 categories to take with them on a desert island and use until they starve to death and die.
All right.
And just add a little bit more information about who you are.
Okay.
So first category is 3 movies to take. So if you had an opportunity, you're Tom Hanks on a desert island.
Okay.
You only get 3 DVDs to take with you to watch over and over and over again. What would they be?
Oh man, it's a hard question to answer because I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and so most of the movies that are coming to mind are children's movies right now.
All right.
I definitely don't want it to be one of those. Let me dig past that. Actually, no, that's not true. Beetlejuice, I think, would absolutely be
First
on the
one?
list. Yeah, the original.
Come on.
There was a period of time where we were watching that movie as a family with I think Felix was 2. I have 2 daughters, Betty and Felix. Felix was 2 years old, and we watched that movie probably 3 times a week.
I mean, how good is it?
Yeah, it's so great. It's so great. Absolute classic.
Second one wasn't that bad.
It wasn't. No,
Could have been worse.
It absolutely could have been worse. Yeah. Tim Burton, he doesn't really miss. Okay. Alone in the Wilderness. It's not really a movie. I mean, it's a movie. It is something that gets played on PBS during the fund drive, and it's like, if you donate, you'll get a copy of this DVD. But it is a story of a guy in the 60s who went, I believe it was Alaska, and set up a camera and recorded himself building a cabin in Alaska by himself.
That's like right up my alley.
Yeah, it's great.
There's this dude called the Outdoor Boys on YouTube.
Yeah.
He is, 13 million followers. He's just this guy who he does everything himself out there.
What a fantasy.
Dude, it is unreal. If you haven't watched it, you need to just get into it. He's a wholesome guy. He'll go out and he'll just take one backpack and he'll be in the tundra in just insane amounts of snow, and just like how he lives.
Yeah,
and
that's
love that.
Yeah, so I fantasize often about
Alone in the Wilderness.
Alone in the Wilderness.
I gotta find that.
Dick Prenicky, I think, is the guy's name. But yeah, he was I think he was a carpenter. And he sustained some injury, and it was like, I can't work anymore, but I can work well enough to go do this. And he just went and did it, set up a tripod, and just recorded.
Unreal.
It's so fucking cool.
You watch Alone at all? You know what that is? Alone?
I'm familiar with it. These days I do not watch much of anything.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's probably the closest you could get to it being real. Like, it's not like Survivor where you have like whole TV series with camera crews. They literally just drop these people in the middle of fucking nowhere with GoPros, and they'll just let you die. It's wild.
That's wild. It is. That's a little dystopian. I like that.
I love it.
Third movie. Wow, my brain is jumping to Dogma, the Kevin Smith movie.
Fantastic.
Which is, I think, from my teenage years. That has always been one of my favorite movies.
He was just in town.
I know. I saw the little video of him walking through the Monroeville Mall.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah,
those are good. Those are good choices. That fits like all the bills.
Yeah,
Some silly stoner film.
Yeah,
Beetlejuice, and then some Alone shit. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, are you a reader at all?
I am.
I usually ask people a couple books, but if you had to pick one book, that you really enjoy, that you would take, that you would like to read?
I mean, the book that I've read the most times is 1984.
Okay.
Orwell. I think I just finished it for like the 7th or 8th time. A couple weeks ago.
Figures.
In
that time.
But yeah, that's probably my go-to.
Okay.
And otherwise, when you ask if I'm a reader, I listen. I can't actually read. I fall asleep if I try to.
Okay.
So I listen to books while I'm working, and most of what I listen to these days is like social studies and economic theory and that kind of stuff. So that's like, I don't know if that's going to do me any good on a desert island. So I'll just go with 1984.
Perfect. Third category, 3 CDs.
3 CDs. Okay.
I have no idea what you could say with this.
Yeah, me neither, man. That's such a broad category. Okay. The first one is my work music. Like if I need to get a project done, I put on A Desperate Youth, Bloodthirsty Babes, the TV on the Radio album.
Okay.
And it's just got like, there's something about it I can focus really well when I'm listening to that.
Okay.
So that would be the first one. And then, Yo-Yo Ma, Chris Thiele, and Edgar Meyer. So it's cello, bass, and mandolin performing Bach trios.
Wow.
And that, I don't 100% know where I first came across it, but I listen to it all the time. And there's a particular song on there that we use since my older daughter was a very young baby, as we call it the Night Night song. But it's just like, it's very, very soft, very, very gentle, and it's a great song to fall asleep to.
Love it.
And then the third album, I just bought is it the 30th anniversary? It is the 30th anniversary edition of Weezer's debut album. And I feel like that might come with me.
That's great. That's a good answer. Weezer's they rip.
Yeah.
Okay, just an extra question. What's the first CD you ever bought?
First CD I ever bought was Beck Odelay.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. First CD I ever owned was Bone Thugs and Harmony. It was burned for me though, so
that was like one of my first. 1999 Eternal.
Yeah,
unreal.
And just listening to that in headphones was incredible.
I know. Listen, I'm like, my brother, like I said, 6 years older than me, so he's passing me down Bone Thugs and Harmony, fucking Master P shit, and it's just, man, what a time.
Yeah.
Bone's incredible.
Yeah.
We just went to we were in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they got a nice little setup there because they're part of it. But okay, third to last question is the death row meal.
Ooh, death row.
So you get an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert. What would it be?
I love food too much for this to be an easy answer. It's like everything. Like I want to eat everything all the time. I'm going to start with dessert.
Perfect.
The perfect dessert is a well-composed cheese plate. I feel strongly about that. You got your like dried fruits and your honey and your nuts.
That's what I was going to ask. If you have some sweet ends on it.
Yeah, I probably have a little bit of charcuterie on there too, little cured meats as well.
Perfect.
But focusing mostly.
I like that. That's a great answer because usually people are like, a fucking cheesecake or like a cake or something. But that's a good call.
You got like all the sensory experience of that too.
Absolutely.
You got, like, the crunch and the soft. So definitely ending with a well curated cheese plate. As far as the main dish goes, it's hard not to say just like a thick cut ribeye that's been super well salted and like seared on the outside and bleeding in the middle. And that probably is served with French fries. That's probably the most chosen answer on here. Nice steak, potato, some sort. And then the appetizer, that's a tough one. I mean,
you want to know the most chosen?
I do.
300 people, fucking cheese sticks.
Like mozzarella sticks?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Surprisingly enough, it's the most chosen.
I kind of believe it. 50% of the people that live in my house, it's their favorite food.
Yeah, it's incredible.
All right. You know what? I'll do mozzarella sticks.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Second to last question. If you're getting ready to go on a road trip, you go into a gas station. What do you pick up?
Oh, that's not proud of it. But sour punch straws, candy.
Absolutely.
Drink a Red Bull through a sour punch straw is a great way to start any road trip. It's the flavor and what's the psychoactive experience that is unlike any other.
That's good. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. If you could have a conversation with anyone, alive or dead, who would it be and why? And if you could forego a loved one.
Okay. Man, you read me. You saw into my eyes.
Well, I mean, I figure, I've asked every single person that's been on here this, and it's usually people, if they have a parent that's passed, and like, it's an assumed answer, and I would absolutely give you that too. But if you had an opportunity to talk to someone that you have no ties to.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think I don't have no ties to this person, but I never spoke to him. I know of him, quite familiar with him. But the guy, the Dick Reinhardt, who gave us Slow is Fast, I would love to sit down and understand a little bit more about both his life and experience and what kind of led him to where he ended up, that kind of set my life in the motion that it rolled in, and just kind of talk shop with that dude. Like, that would be probably the most exciting conversation to have, I would say.
That's a fantastic answer. This was a fantastic conversation.
It really was, man. Thank you.
Wonderful time talking with you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking some time. I know you got a family, probably free time's limited. So for you to come over and share your story with me is really, really appreciated. Before I let you go, please take a second to tell people where they could, check out your work, follow you on Instagram, the whole thing.
Yeah. You can find us at studebakermetals.com. Follow us on Instagram at Studebaker Metals. And there's a few local places here in Pittsburgh. You can see us. We're at Love Pittsburgh. They've got a couple locations in Toad Flax and Shadyside. And you can visit us at 3101 Smallman Street in the Strip District, right next to the 31st Street Bridge.
Absolutely. Everyone else is listening. Appreciate you as usual. Each and every week, we're back with another great guest doing great things for the city. Thank you for listening. Call you right back. There you go.
That was great, man.
First podcast in the book.
I gotta use the telephone.
Hello?